We're hearing about AI literally everywhere these days, right? From self-driving car screw-ups to facial recognition that just gets it wrong. And it's so easy to point the finger and say, oh, it's the bad AI. But what if the problem isn't some rogue machine? What if the real issue is, well, us? The truth is, AI only knows what we teach it. And it turns out we're sometimes teaching it our own hidden biases. So that's really the big question we're tackling today. Why does AI get it so wrong sometimes? Because when an algorithm makes a decision that feels unfair or biased, it's not just some random glitch in the system. Oh no, there's a systematic reason for it, and it starts way, way before a single line of code is even run.
And this isn't just some abstract academic problem. It has huge real-world consequences. I mean, think about it. We're talking about hiring tools that automatically screen out amazing female candidates, or facial recognition that works great on light skin but fails miserably on darker skin tones. We've even seen policing algorithms that unfairly target certain neighborhoods. These are not minor bugs, people. These are deeply ingrained errors that are affecting real people's lives right now. All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, let's first dig into what's actually happening when an algorithm goes wrong. It's not as simple as a math error like 2 plus 2 equals 5. It's about something much more subtle, something called algorithmic bias. Now, that key phrase here is systematic errors. This isn't about an AI making a one-off random mistake. We're talking about a built-in, repeatable flaw that causes it to consistently and unfairly discriminate against a particular group of people, whether that's based on race or gender or something else entirely.
And here's the twist, the crucial takeaway of this whole thing. We love to blame the algorithm's mysterious black box, but the problem, it's usually not the machine itself. An AI is basically just a super powerful pattern-finding engine. The real issue is the fuel we're feeding it, the data. You've heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? Well, it's never been more true. If the data we give it is biased, then the AI's decisions are going to be biased. End of story. Okay, so if the data is the culprit, then where does all this bias actually come from? I mean, data itself doesn't have opinions, right? It's just numbers and text. But it can perfectly reflect the flawed opinions and broken structures of the world it was collected from.
And it turns out there are three main ways that our very human flaws can kind of infect the data we use to train these AIs. And understanding these three is really the key to cracking this whole problem.
So let's break them down. Here are the three core types of data bias that are causing all these headaches.
Okay, first up, we have what's called sample bias. This one is actually pretty straightforward. It happens when the data you use to train an AI, well, it just doesn't accurately represent the real world the AI will eventually have to operate in. Think about a self-driving car, for example. If you only ever train it using pictures from sunny, clear, daytime drives, how on earth could you expect it to handle a snowy night or a sudden blinding downpour? You can't. Its training data was a totally incomplete and therefore biased sample of reality. All right, number 2 is prejudicial bias. And this is where things start to get really tricky. This bias doesn't come from a bad or incomplete sample. Nope. It comes from the real world itself, reflecting all the historical and societal prejudices that are baked right into the data we feed the machine. Here's a classic example. Let's say an AI is trained on thousands and thousands of pictures of people at work. It might look at all this data and observe that, hey, most of the nurses in these photos are women. So it learns a simple statistical correlation. Nurse equals female. Now, the AI isn't trying to be sexist. It's just reflecting a statistical reality it found in its training data. But by learning that pattern, it ends up reinforcing a harmful stereotype, and that can lead to some really biased decisions down the line.
And finally, number 3, we have measurement bias. This one happens when the very tools we use to collect the data are flawed from the get-go, systematically distorting every single data point in pretty much the same way. Think about it like this. Imagine you have a ruler, but it's just a tiny bit short. Say it's missing 1/8 of an inch. Well, every single thing you measure with that ruler will be recorded as being slightly longer than it actually is, right? It's a consistent, systematic distortion. It's the same idea with data. If a camera has a weird color filter or a survey asks leading questions, the data it produces is going to have a built-in, consistent error. Okay, now, before we jump into how we can fix all this, we really need to clear up a common point of confusion. Because when you hear data scientists use the word bias, they could be talking about two completely different things. So on the one hand, you have the societal bias we've been talking about this whole time, the flaws from the real world, like stereotypes and prejudice that get trapped in the data. But data scientists also use the word bias in a purely technical sense. This technical bias is just a property of the model, like a tunable setting. You can think of it like a knob that controls how rigid or flexible the model's assumptions are. It's all part of this constant balancing act they do. The important thing for you to know is that when an engineer says they're reducing bias, they might just be tweaking a setting on the algorithm, not necessarily solving that bigger, messier societal problem.
Now, I know this all sounds kind of grim, but it's not hopeless. Not at all. The good news is that we're not powerless here. There are absolutely concrete, actionable steps we can take to fight back against AI bias. So where do we start? Well, it begins with auditing the data, using tools to sniff out bias before the AI is ever released into the wild. Next, the team has to actually sit down and define what fairness even looks like for their specific project, because believe me, it's not always obvious. It's also absolutely critical to bring in a diverse group of stakeholders, not just engineers, to help spot blind spots the team might have. And finally, the job isn't done at launch. You have to continuously monitor the AI out in the real world because you never know what unintended consequences might pop up. But the single most important principle that underpins all of this is transparency. It's huge. If a model is found to be biased, that just can't be swept under the rug. For people to ever trust these systems, they have to know how they work and, just as importantly, where they fail. And this quote here really just nails the core idea. We have to stop thinking of AI as some kind of neutral, objective judge. Every single algorithm out there is a product of human choices. And with those choices comes human responsibility, period.
Ultimately, you can think of AI as a powerful mirror. It doesn't show us the world as we wish it were. It shows us the world as it's represented in our data, flaws and all. So the most important question we have to ask isn't really about the technology. It's about us. When we look in that mirror and see a flawed reflection staring back, do we blame the mirror or do we get to work fixing the reality it's showing us?